Hello, everybody. It's your girl, Tina, back in the house. It's fine. Everything is fine, podcast. And, okay, I've tried to record this like 3 times. I decided like multiple times. Well, the first time I got interrupted by a call. Second time, I just decided I wasn't saying what I was trying to say right. So I'm going to just start over. So, I'm out outside laying down in the sun once again. I am black as hell right now, and I love it here. Shout out to everybody who's in a city or state that, it's cold and then it becomes warm, and you're like, yes. And you get to lay out and get that vitamin D, because that is the best D to get. Anyways, sorry, I'm just making a joke, but it's inappropriate. This is why it's not for kids. This podcast is not for children. It's for adults only. So anyways, okay. So last podcast got interrupted. The last thing I was ultimately trying to say to everybody was, I pray and I hope that everyone is not a angry and miserable person in this world, that we can all learn how to be enthralled and in tune with our own selves and our own lives, to the point that we don't have room to be comparing and contrasting and affected by other people, because we're so worried about our own happiness and our own, growth and our own accountability of who we are, how we're acting, and what we're doing, to the point that, you're not worried about what anybody else has going on, because what they have going on is none of your business. Because it's not about them, it's about you. And not in a selfish way, but in a self-loving way, in an understanding way of knowing that, you being your best self is what can help the world around you. Because if you're making sure to be who you need to be, everybody else around you will be affected positively by you being your best self, right? And then on top of you being your best self, and that positively affecting everyone else, you also not being negatively affected by other people and their lack of awareness and lack of self-awareness and lack of self-understanding, to where, when they are projecting onto you their own insecurities, their own issues, and their own feelings that are unresolved within them, they are taking out on you. You can be understanding and comprehensive of knowing that that's not your fault, that if they are insecure, or if they are unhappy with their own lives, that when they're showing that on, like, taking it out on you, trying to bring you down to their level because they're not at your level, like, that's not your fault, that's not your problem. You don't need to be affected by them or angry about it, as I once was, right? Because there's no point in being mad about what they got going on. Shit, they're already mad about it, right? So comprehension is kind of the key word for this podcast, because I think something I learned that I think we as a society are lacking in understanding is the understanding of what comprehension, the role it plays in our relationships with one another. Because comprehension, are they actively capable to understand? And if not, can you get in their perspective to explain to them from a point of view they understand, not your understanding? And if not, can you agree to disagree? Why let it bother you, regardless of the frustration? Because one thing we can say, right, that I know for sure is, it is very frustrating, right, when you're trying to explain something to someone and they just are not understanding it at all. Like, it's very easy, and I know firsthand, I'm speaking from firsthand experience, I can 100% attest to understanding the frustration that comes. If anything, like I said, it just took me all these years to finally get to a place of losing my frustration when it comes to dealing with others and their lack of understanding me and where I'm coming from and who I am, to the point that where now I'm upset about it, because why can they not understand me? It's frustrating, right? But understanding that, how the accountability part on my behalf is to be able to say, well, I don't have to be angry or upset at the other person because of their lack of comprehension of what I'm trying to explain to them, because that's just their own ignorance. And if people don't want to understand, that's okay, because that's on them, and that's going to be their own torture in their lives, because to not be understanding and not willing to be empathetic and be able to step into other people's perspectives to grow as individuals by understanding that, like, everybody is living from their own place of knowledge and own place of understanding. If they don't want to be, if you have a higher ability to understand things, it is your responsibility to either try to spread the good, positive, truthful knowledge, and or allow other people to be in the lack of understanding and the lack of knowledge that they live in without it affecting you, because there's no point in that, because you cannot make people understand or make people be knowledgeable or willing to educate themselves if they are unable to or unwilling to. I guess willing is the better word, because you could explain something to someone as well as you possibly could, even standing in their shoes and trying to give them that comprehension from their ability of understanding and and being able to talk to them from a knowledge point that they could grasp. And they might still not want to know and not want to understand, because that's the thing. There are a lot of people in this world who just don't want to understand. They would rather stay stuck and stay only in their ability to understand from what they want to understand, not what it is. And so you could give them all the facts in the world, you could give them all the examples in the world, and you could give it to them in a way that they can for sure 100% fully be comprehensible in, and they still won't comprehend it because they just don't want to, because it goes against their core beliefs and their core morality of where they stand. And so they're not trying to budge or waver, because some people, it's like, if that's how they've thought and that's the way that they've operated and lived in this particular and specific mindset, in order for them to have to shift the way they think, it would require them to completely reevaluate everything else that they believe in. And they're so unwilling to do so, because that's a lot of work to have to change everything you've ever known or everything you've ever believed in, because even if it's right and it makes sense and it's actually factual and logical to the world we live in today, they're not willing to do that. And then that's also okay, because that's their lives, and that will be their own continuous struggle that they have to live in, because knowledge is power, knowledge is freedom, and knowledge is wealth, because having the knowledge is how you can prosper in life. Without knowledge, you will stay ignorant, which means you stay stuck, which means you stay in a cycle of what is not necessarily right and true, right? And if that is the case, well, that sucks for whoever is living and operating in that. So instead of being angry about it, you got to feel sad for them, because that's sad, if someone doesn't want to grow, doesn't want to learn, doesn't want to be aware and be operating in a realistic, so at that point, people are delusional and they like that and they want to be that. And if they want to be that, let them be that. Doesn't make it easier, but it's okay to agree to disagree with them, because why else would you, stoop to their level? Because some people really just can't get it, and some people it's not, even if they can't get it, they just don't want to get it. So being enlightened and educated is a gift, and being knowledgeable is a responsibility as well. So like I said, when you are the more knowledgeable person, it is your responsibility to be the one to be the bigger person while dealing with people who are in an ignorant mindset and an unable to comprehend mentality. And I think the other part of that is sometimes difficult and frustrating. Oh, damn it. Sorry, guys. My notebook got wet. Damn. Uh-oh. Sorry, guys. Taking a second. Handling some business. Okay. I'm back. Where was I at? Oh, yeah. Sorry, my notebook got some coffee on it. I had to take care of that real fast. Where I was going with this all was to finish saying, at the end of the day, it is your responsibility, if you are the knowledgeable person, to be the bigger person. That doesn't make it any easier just because you're aware, and they are. I mean, I can understand 100% how frustrating and upsetting it is. But imagine how much more frustrating and draining and unfortunate it is to be a person who just doesn't get anything, who's like so stuck in their own mentality, this negative mentality that, you know, if you have experienced it with them, to know how like frustrating and upsetting it is to deal with those people. You got to remember that those people are frustrated and upset within themselves as well, because living anything outside of being enlightened and informed and in tune with yourself, to be able to be that in tune with the world and others, I mean, that's hard, because you're going to always be at odds with people and things in life because you just don't get it, you know? So you got to feel sorry for those people instead of being upset at them. And when I say that, I also say that to say, let's see here. This is what I wrote down all about it. You know, I put enlightenment and education. They can't or want or won't understand, leave it alone. But the thing is when you're trying to get them to understand, do it in a not belittling or using your knowledge to be superior way. Because people are also, if you are trying to get someone to understand something and you're talking to them in a belittling, berating way, where you're just like, you're fucking stupid, you don't understand, how the fuck don't you get this, da-da-da, like, you're fucking dumb, da-da-da. I used to do that, right, when I was like immature and ignorant in that ideal myself, right, was I used to talk to people like, you're fucking dumb, and like I just did not understand why they couldn't get it. And so I would talk to them in this berating way that I didn't really think of it as berating. That's just the way I talked, right, at that point in time. And then like it would make it worse though, because when you're berating and belittling people, now it's a worse and new problem, because they're going to get defensive and offended because you are now offending them. And so not only are you not getting them to understand what you're trying to say, but now you have a different problem on your hands, because now they're upset and genuinely offended by what you're saying, which they have every right to be at that point. So now they feel right instead of being wrong over whatever topic and matter you're speaking on. Because if you're trying to educate them and they're not trying to hear it, and then you start berating them for their lack of comprehension in what you're trying to explain, well, now they feel right because you are wrong when you're offending them, right? So now they're definitely not trying to hear whatever you're trying to say to them. So it's a lose-lose situation. And it's not about being superior to others. You know, being knowledgeable does make you superior in the sense of your knowledge, but it doesn't make you above them as human beings. Because if they were to change and be able to be comprehensive, now you guys are back in the same playing field. But the thing is that you're supposed to treat people the same way no matter what at all times, because nobody is better than anybody. That is, once again, ego trying to tell you that you're above anybody. I don't care if you got more money than them, more intelligence than them, better looks than them, better car, house, job. Nothing makes you better than another person, because at the end of the day, we're all going to die. And once again, I know everybody's not religious. Me personally, I believe in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And if you read the Bible, then you know that, what did Jesus always say? Live by the golden rule and treat everybody with humility. Love thy neighbor as thyself. In other words, understanding that we're all just people, man. And nobody is above anybody. So, understanding that they're the ones suffering when they're ignorant, right? And if they're lacking in the knowledge and understanding and awareness, that is something that is going to be creating issues in their lives, and then that stinks for them. And so just try to enlighten them, and if you can't, then let it go, because there's no point in arguing about it. Because, let's see, active closed-mindedness, the choice to not understand, that is a character flaw. Positive ignorance is genuinely never learned or explained, so truly do not know or understand, and that is not their fault. No blame. Okay, here, let me see. My notes are kind of all over the place. So basically, let's see. To be closed-mindedness is a choice. Oh, okay. I see what I was trying to say here. Okay, so when you are closed-minded, that is a choice, because you are actively choosing to not understand, and that is a character flaw. However, to be truly ignorant is they absolutely, genuinely were never taught or explained something, so they truly do not know or understand, and that is not their fault. So in other words, you really cannot be mad at somebody for what they've never been taught or never had anybody explain to them for them to understand. That is not a choice. That is just the lack of knowledge, which you see people all over the world who experience that, right? Where, like, look at the school systems. Like, some schools, they don't actually educate their students properly in the same way that other areas might make sure to properly educate their students. And so take, like, a suburban area versus the hood, the public school system versus a upper middle class society's school system. They're going to get proper education, proper resources in order to advance in their knowledge and ability to learn, versus in a hood district, in a poverty district where they don't even fund the schools properly in order to get the education or good teaching out and resources out for these kids to learn properly, which is also, once again, a society issue of poverty being spread amongst poverty to keep people down, keep the suppression of those people down, and to also amplify and continue the upper middle class in staying in an upper middle class with education opportunities available. But you can't blame people for what they really don't know, is the bottom line. There's nothing wrong with always asking questions, too. I think that's something, okay, so that was something that kind of goes into that. I think a lot of times people don't ask each other questions because they don't want to sound stupid. But I always say it's worse to act like you know something when you don't. That makes you actually look stupid, and that makes you look even dumber than just to not understand or know something. And for people who are understanding and are trying to, get somebody to understand something, it's always good to ask questions when you're in those conversations, right? Because trying to get somebody's perspective so that you can even explain it to them, to understanding where they're not understanding, that is the key to it all. Like, asking questions, that's how you gain knowledge. That's the only way to gain knowledge. Like the idea that no question is a stupid question, that is like almost all the way true. Granted, is there a level of you can ask people questions to be a dickhead, and then that's a stupid question. Or like just to be funny and like talking shit subliminally, like sarcastically asking questions. Like that doesn't fall in. I'm saying a genuine question to genuinely get an answer to better understand something. There's nothing wrong with that. No matter what level of question asking you are looking to have, whether it is actually educationally based, like about science. Let's just use the trees. Like you want to actually know, how do trees grow? That's an educational question that regards to science. Or if you're trying to ask someone like, well, what is your perspective on this? To get a better understanding of where someone's coming from. Nothing's wrong with that. In the middle, you could be in the middle of like having a debate or something and being like, well, I don't understand what you mean when you're saying that. Like, can you explain to me better what you're trying to say to me so I can get an understanding of what your understanding is of this? Nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with asking as many questions as you need to till you get a full understanding of something. Sometimes you might have to ask a question over and over and reword it a little differently each time till you really understand what you're trying to get, the information, whatever information you're looking to achieve and understand. And now, know. You might have to ask a question over and over and over again and just keep asking questions until, you understand it. It's okay. You should always ask questions over and over until you get your full understanding, because you don't want to get a half understanding or a partial understanding, because you don't want to, don't ever feel like embarrassed to ask these questions over and over until you get your full understanding. It doesn't make you dumb to continue to ask a question. It makes you smart, because smart people ask questions. That's how intelligence is improved. It's solely through question asking, because you got to ask questions. However, you want to ask questions after somebody is done trying to explain something, because if you're asking questions in the middle of them explaining, well, then that's counterproductive, because they might answer your question while they're talking. So wait, that's why, in schooling, you always got that save questions till the end. Or if you do any type of, like at work or anything, like any type of place you go where they're going to educate you on something, they always say save your questions till the end. That is why. Because, if you ask a question too soon, your question might be answered. But if they explained everything and then you still have questions, then there's nothing wrong with asking questions and asking as many questions as you need till you are fully knowledged in whatever it is that you are looking to get answers in. Asking whatever you're asking the questions on, because you're trying to understand. Nothing wrong with that. Smart people ask questions to understand. To verify the information. Sometimes you just need verification so you can understand the information being given to you. So the last thing I'll touch on, and then I'm done, I wrote on here facts versus opinions. That's another thing. At the end of the day, everybody has different opinions on things, but opinions and facts are not the same. And I think this is something where a lot of people struggle in life with one another is like a lot of people will argue with each other on their opinions. And, it's one of those things where you can argue, you can't really argue with someone on their opinion, because an opinion means that's just how they feel, but an opinion is not a fact. So at the end of the day, the only time it's worth arguing with someone over a fact, that's valid. If you go, debate, I should say, more than argue. You should never argue with anybody over anything, because there's no point in arguing. It doesn't really solve anything ever. So I'm not going to say argue. But if you want to go back and forth with someone and debate with somebody over a fact, that's valid. If you have the valid information regarding this fact and this person is arguing the facts with their opinions, making it clear first and foremost that you cannot argue over a fact with an opinion, because a fact is a fact is a fact, which means it's a fact, which means it is proven and it is correct always. Like, a fact is correct, but an opinion is not always is not always a fact. You can have a fact-based opinion, and then that's valid. But your opinions are not always facts. And if somebody wants to argue with you with an opinion over a fact, then that goes into where don't even waste your breath, because an opinion is just how someone feels. And that's fine if someone feels however they want to feel. That they're entitled to how they feel, but that does not make it right or valid. Now, I think in our society we see a lot today, people having opinions on things and trying to push them down people's throats and push it down everybody's, push it on everybody that oh, my opinion matters. And your opinion is valid for you, but that does not mean it's valid for the world or society or in real life. This is where delusional people come into play a lot of times, is there's this delusional attitude nowadays that if I have an opinion, it's just right, and that is not true. You can have opinions that are right to you, but that doesn't mean that they're right in general, because if they are not fact-based, then that's just how you feel, and a feeling is not overriding a fact. I can feel like the sun is purple, and that does not make it a fact. And I can have an opinion that the sky is green, and I love it. And that doesn't mean that the sky is green, but that doesn't mean that I don't love it and think it's green, right? That's the only validity in it, is that I think so. And for me, if I believe that, then that's true to me. That's not true to life and reality, right? So, I don't know. I think hopefully people can hear this one and take it into account to realize that. Stop trying to tell people you're right and you're just going off your opinion. Before you want to argue something or stand on something, get the facts. Knowledge is power. Don't try to, don't just base how you feel and what you think on your own decision and actively go out into this world and debate it and argue it with people, because that's what makes you ignorant, stupid. Or that's where ignorance gets spread, because other people, if you're an influential person out here spreading knowledge that is unfactual, some people will just blindly follow and believe you if you sound convicted in what you're saying so strongly that people will just believe you, because they're like, wow, he means what he says, but he could mean what he says and be still saying wrong things. So, it's that's where everybody is supposed to take it upon themselves to learn and get knowledge on their own time. Because if you don't take your own time to get knowledge and learn things as facts, you're going to remain ignorant in this world, and that's going to be your own personal downfall. Because anybody in power, anybody of any success, it all stems from knowledge first. Nobody gets anywhere in life without knowledge. So never forget that. I love you guys. Till next time, it's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. Love you.